All right. Well, I am super excited to be here today and be with you today. It is a beautiful day. It seems as though fall has occurred in different parts of the country. I can't speak to the West Coast where there's a lot of stuff happening. A lot of stuff is happening. And I think that there is no better person for us to talk to about much of what's happening than Matt Shobert, a Warrior PATHH alum, a friend, an amazing human being. So Matt Shobert, thank you for being with us today.
I am truly honored to be with you, and it's nice to see you again after 2.5 years.
Yeah, so we met, I think, it had to be March or April of 2017, right? No.
April. Yeah, April of 2018.
Yes,
I don't know, 2.5.
And early on in the life of the Boulder Crest, Arizona location.
Yeah. In
so
fact, I think one of your first, if not the first, one of the proud few first responders accepted or invited into the program, and honored to represent.
Absolutely. And I think, it's a great point you raise. And I think you really are, like, you were one of the pioneers, which is no surprise. And, we have had the opportunity to serve a good number of first responders, as have some of our partners. And we just did a first responder only program, and we'll do 2 of those this year. So, for us, I think it's an amazing opportunity to be able to do that and to get to serve your amazing community. So why don't we start from the start? So talk to me about where you grew up, Matt Shobert, and just where did you grow up, and a little bit about your upbringing.
Interestingly enough, and found out or confirmed this in Warrior PATHH, but I was born in Pennsylvania, spent 5 or 7 years there, and then moved to Arizona with my parents. And I didn't realize it until Warrior PATHH, but I had somewhat of a rough upbringing and childhood that made me who I am today, and we'll leave it at that. But grew up in Arizona, always wanted to be a police officer for some reason, but this is a joke. But when I took the entrance exam, I did so well, they moved me into the fire academy. And so I became a firefighter instead. And I spent 15 years in Tucson, 8 years in Sedona as their fire chief, and then moved to California and spent about 7 years as a fire chief in California in 2 different cities, Hemet and Murrieta, California, in Southern California, where in 2014, of July 2nd, I was nearly killed in the line of duty, received a traumatic brain injury, was alone at the time, had to save my own life, was later diagnosed with acute stress disorder and PTSD, became suicidal with a plan. I was going to jump off Coronado Bridge. But to fortify that a little bit, I guess with my upbringing, I wanted to find a career where I could help other people on their worst day. And I certainly was able to do that. And I think I did a really good job of helping other people on their worst days until I had my worst day.
And let's, before we get back to July 2nd, in terms of was before you had, I don't know what you would call it, the accident, but before that happened, was it everything that you had wanted it to be?
Oh, for sure. It was not just a job. It was my hobby. It was my lifestyle. It was who I was. I mean, I had, not today, but I had a flat top that I got a flat top cut every Thursday afternoon, a standing appointment, Dalmatian dog, a mustache. I mean, it was who I was. It was my identity, which I think compounded my issues when I lost my career in a split second, because I didn't know who the heck I was anymore. Didn't know where I was, why I was, who I was, any of that stuff.
And not to be wonky about this, but one of the things that's true about these warrior professions, and I think, look, in part, I mean, you're running into burning buildings, right? So I think in part, I think you have to have a level of commitment that, like, if you work, I used to work at Exxon, right? So if you work at Exxon, you don't have to be that committed, and nothing really is going to happen. But if you are to do the things that police, fire, and the military have to do, like Ken disarming bombs, there has to be a level of commitment that is profound in order to be willing to do those. I think that would be my sense. And what we see, right, is that the job affiliation, the extent to which a man like you, a warrior like you, identifies themselves with their job is almost like 90% of your identity comes from that. And that, I think that is a part and parcel of what I think you have to have that to be good at your job. That would be my sense, because it's not a job.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a lifestyle, which doesn't even really do it justice. But it's who I was. It's who I wanted to be. And like I said, that was taken away literally in a split second. You know, when I woke up dying in a field by myself, that was the end.
And Matt, so do you want to talk at all, so something happened on July 2nd. Do you want to talk at all about the details? It's up to you.
I'll be happy to, but I don't want to, we, in Warrior Path, we talk about, I forget the term, no war stories or whatever you call it. And I don't want to get into that hoopla, but the nutshell version is I was overseeing a brush clearing operation where a commercial tractor was mowing some brush in Southern California. If you watch any of the news, it's a crazy, disastrous tinderbox situation. So we were 6 years ago trying to make that a little bit more safer. And I had got there before my engine company got there and was overseeing this commercial mower, clear this portion of town, the northwest corner of the town I was fire chief in. And he launched a fist-sized rock 50 yards. He was heading the other direction, and it struck me right in the face right here, literally ripped off my lower jaw. And he was headed the other way, and my crew hadn't got there. So I woke up face down in the dirt, bleeding to death with a third of my head missing. And that'll leave a mark, and it certainly did. And not just a physical mark. I got a bunch of scars and whatnot. And this is my left hip bone right here with a steel plate. And then it hit here. It also rattled my brain, giving me a traumatic brain injury. But so I had to initially save my own life, then radio for help for my firefighters to come and save my life. And then they flew me to a trauma center where they continued to save my life. And then it was 212 procedures to get me where I am today. But really the week I spent with Boulder Crest and the 18 months of follow-up is what really brought me full circle. Because as I said, after all that recovery and all that grief and all that pain and all that anguish, I was still going to kill myself. Everybody was telling me, oh, you're so lucky to be alive, when I was freaking had a suicide plan. It's a strange dichotomy.
And was that, do you think, more about that you could no longer do the thing you loved, or about the pain and all this? Like, why did you not want to live?
Because I felt like I'm worthless. I guess I lost my career, couldn't do what I loved. I wasn't being a good husband. I was depressed. I was anxiety ridden. But for some reason, things happened, and 2 and 2 became 5, and I found you guys, and am struggling well.
And how did you, so let's stop for a second. So as you look at all the stuff there's large swaths of the West that are on fire, right? So do you have a perspective or a take on what's happening, and non-political, please, but a take on what's happening from the chief perspective?
Sure. It's a combination of many things. And it's hard to address this question without becoming somewhat political. But brooming the forest is not going to prevent catastrophic wildfires that are killing dozens of people and burning down thousands of homes. I believe in the science. I think, the vegetation out there is drier than a kiln dried 2x4. the vegetation in the forest. And that's because of a chronic historic drought, increased dry winds, warmer days. All this has come together, and then building additional houses into the urban interface, or where the trees meet the city. And those 3 or 4 things have come together to really create a tinderbox situation where people are dying and properties getting destroyed. And it's not just a thing; it's based on science.
Got it. Well, sorry, that was just my personal curiosity. So, we were talking a little bit before we started recording, and in post-traumatic growth terms, we talk about these events in our life that create very clear before and after dividing lines. And obviously for you, it sounds like you had a life that was exactly what you had aspired for, right? You were the chief, you presumably were in geographies that you enjoyed, you were doing meaningful work, and in a second that was taken from you. And what post-traumatic growth is about isn't that trauma is good, right? What happened to you is not a good thing in any way, shape, or form. And if it could be undone, it ought to have been undone. Is the struggle to figure out what you believe and who you are after that can allow you basically have to reconstitute the way they did to your face, that you have to reconstitute your life, right?
Yeah, most definitely. And that's hard to do when you struggle with esteem issues, because you're not the person I once was. I wasn't the quick thinker and the multitasker, and now I'm more one-dimensional with a very short fuse. And I got to work real hard to I don't want to say compensate, but I'll use the word compensate for those shortcomings that I didn't have prior to the injury. And I call them shortcomings, but honest to God, I would rather be, despite the anxiety and the depression and the different things that I have to work real hard to overcome, I would rather be the person I am today than the person I was 5 minutes before the injury.
And it's an amazing statement. So why do you say that?
Empathy and compassion. I have perhaps too much empathy and too much compassion for those that struggle, for those that are oppressed, for those that are hurting. And before, while I would do my best to help them in an emergency situation, I didn't think twice about moving on, once I saw the guy without a shoe or a foot. And now I do what I can to help. I join different organizations that help give back to those that aren't as well off as we are. Ainsley's Angels. I do 5 and 10K races with disabled children, pushing them in carts so they can actually race. And
can we talk about that for a little? How did you get into that? Because I remember the pictures.
Yeah, I did a 5K race on a Thanksgiving turkey trot, and they were there doing their thing, and I was there trying to be as fast as I could. And I realized there's more to being as fast as you can when you're a fat old man. And so I talked to the lady who happens to be a Marine veteran, one of the mothers of the disabled kids, who happens to be a Marine veteran with PTSD, and we connected. And a week later, I was pushing her son in the next race, and got involved that way. And it's amazing when you see the joy and the smile on these kids. Quite frankly, the type of people that I used to look the other way when I was the other person. Amazing. Or that were invisible to me when I saw them before my injury.
And you were talking about, so I know I interrupted you. We were talking about, really feeling committed to serving others, which is a huge part of, it reminds me, one of the classic stories of post-traumatic growth was a guy who was a rock star, and he had a tour bus crash and he became paralyzed. And what he said is that crash saved his life, and it woke him up, right? And it was this wake-up call you never wish happened. And so let's talk a little bit about what you do to keep yourself struggling well. what are the things that work for you and help you and you know, and you consistently do?
Actually, I'm proud to acknowledge that I've got a streak of like 182 days of meditation going TM. And I will be honest and say I don't do rigid 20 minutes in the morning and a rigid 20 minutes in the evening, but because sometimes, depending on what you got going on during the day, it becomes more stressful trying to find the 20 minutes to do it than it does
To do it.
to not do it. But what I'll do is sometimes you can do a 20-minute TM in 12 minutes if you need to. And I don't want to give anybody a bunch of shortcuts or anything, but a little bit is better than nothing.
Right.
So I've got a good 6-month streak of TMing gone after a brief respite. Music is very key to me. The exercise program, you know, sweating, pushing yourself to the point of exhaustion when you're exercising. I did a 9/11 memorial stair climb. We did some fundraising for firefighter behavioral health in the San Diego area, where I did 110 flights of stairs in memoriam of those who lost their lives on 9/11. And so that was the preparation for that, and the accomplishment of doing that was another way to get a workout and give back. Giving back is another of the things that has helped. I have a lot of firefighters. I think we're up to like 40 who have been, and I think 3 of them have been through your program. But 40, give or take, have called me and said, look, dude, I don't know what's going on, but I want to kill myself. Drinking too much. My wife wants to leave me. And not that have diagnosed them or anything, but been there, done that. And I've got them, I've helped them. I've been a connector, whether it's through getting them into Boulder Crest or getting them into counseling or just getting them into an exercise program and cut down or stop drinking and help them out in that manner. And that's, I don't want to say, it helps when you can give back at that level.
So, and I have 2 questions. So one is to go back to music. So talk about music and what you do with music and why you enjoy that.
It's funny. I can wake up in the morning, and caffeine too. I got to have my coffee, but I'll have 3 cups of coffee and be watching the news, and then I'll switch on my music on what's that music called? Spotify, and you can literally pick any genre or band that you want. I'm a big Rolling Stones fan, but as soon as I could be depressed and have a little anxiety, put on the music, and 2 minutes later I'm playing air drums or air guitar or air bass, and everything just changes. And that's why, like this morning, I woke up like there's no magic dust. So I think some people think you go to Boulder Crest, you go to a counselor, you get on meds, and everything goes back to normal when you're happy, joyous, and free. And that's not the case. What it does is it gives you the tools to make the best out of a bad situation and have a life that is enjoyable, struggling well. And so today I woke up a little bit depressed, a little anxiety ridden. We're in Tucson, and forced myself to go run a mountain, which is on the west side of Tucson, and went and did that. And it's 95 degrees, and it's a very steep, short incline. It's about a 2-mile round trip. But half hour later, I was sweating like crazy, listening to the music in my car, and looked in the mirror, looked at my scars, and told myself it's going to be okay.
You know, it's amazing. I think it's one of those things where you do what sometimes you have to do what you don't feel like doing in order to feel the way you want to feel, right? And to your point, you know, and to say, you know, you got to do different to get different. But I'm with you. You know, I have a Peloton, which while I love the bike and the rest of it, it's all based on music, right? It's all based on music, and then that powering you to do high interval stuff. But more importantly, it's like they say that music is the only thing that goes through both hemispheres of our brain and connects to us in a really powerful way. It's obviously a key part of Warrior Path is to to figure out how do you use song. And because it's easy if you're in a crappy mood to listen to David Gray and be in a more crappy. I mean, David Gray even has a song on his live album where he says, you probably don't want to listen to this if you're feeling shitty. Like, it's, he understands the possible impact of melancholy, music. And so I think making the right choice for us as opposed to necessarily how we feel in that moment is one of the keys, right?
Oh, for sure. And so for me, it's, and I got a dog who's just amazing and a wife who stood by me. But the big thing I always say is nature, rock and roll music, a dog, and rigorous cardio are the four things that can take you off the side of the mountain. And certainly, programs like Boulder Crest, and I've also did just about every other therapy and every kind of medication there is out there. But the post-traumatic growth is the one that I guess restored my hope, because you can wake up and have a bad day, but it's temporary if you do the right stuff.
Yeah. That's amazing. And you left out one thing that I feel like I should mention, especially because y'all beat the hell out of us, is where does the Padres fit into all of that?
It's interesting. We live right downtown in San Diego by the stadium, and the Padres, they're a big diversion as well. They're doing good this year. I think they're going to meet the Rays in the World Series. I got a buddy of mine who used to play for the Padres, now plays for the Rays, and I would love to see the Rays and the Padres in the series.
Can you see into the stadium when they're playing?
Actually, I don't want to answer that question. Actually, we can, and the ALCS is in San Diego as well as the division championship, so I can sit on my porch and watch every American League Championship Series and Division Series for the in the next month,
while obeying quarantine restrictions and all that, right? Which is pretty good to see.
Yeah, and the people are little, the players are little, but it doesn't matter.
Well, and my team, the Rangers, gave the gift to you of a new nickname, which was Slam Diego.
Slam Diego, yeah.
You had so many grand slams against Tatis, whose dad played for us. Yeah. So that makes me feel old, by the way, when kids who you watched when I grew up are playing. It makes me feel, I don't think I'm old, but it makes me feel old.
For sure. And I haven't kept track. Is Texas in the running for the playoffs?
No, we're in the running for the opposite of the playoffs. We're like 17-34. So
okay. Yeah.
But the Stars are in the Stanley Cup Finals.
I don't even know what that means.
That's okay. So you talked about nature, right? And you talked about going outside, and I think you split your time between Arizona and California. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of like where you are environmentally, like in terms of where you live and have the ability to be? I mean, I think it probably is that much. No, it is that much more important right now because we're restricted in our mobility. So you kind of have to enjoy it. So just talk about how you decided where you wanted to stay, and how important that is and how important nature is to you.
Okay. Well, interestingly enough, we've been hunkered down in San Diego for the past 6 months, and we finally decided we better go check on our little studio condo in Tucson because it's been 6 or 7 months, and between all the critters and water issues and whatnot, 6 or 7 months is a long time to leave this place abandoned. So we got here and just to check it out, but we kind of like it. I actually like the heat, believe it or not. The hotter the better as far as I'm concerned, because the sun feels good and you sweat easier when you're exercising when it's 100 degrees. But when we got here, interestingly enough, I guess they're called water bugs, but to me they're cockroaches on steroids. Because the water tubes had dried up, and so they come out of the sewer system, these huge things, and we had like a dozen of them running around our place that I had to kill. Not with a fly swatter, you got to use like a sledgehammer on these cockroaches. They're foot long, but it was pretty nasty. We got those cleaned up, and I don't know, we're enjoying Tucson. I like the people, I like the culture, I like the food, but all that's kind of untouchable right now. But at least just being here gives us a sense of all that. And this is where I went to school. This is where I kind of grew up my teenage years into my early 20s, and then 15 years in the fire service here before I promoted up and out.
So, and let's, you mentioned doing some really meaningful work. And I remember we talked about that from the moment you came out and to the program in support of your fellow firefighters. And, you talk about, you loving what you did and the struggle being that you couldn't do it anymore. And certainly, and we had a friend of ours who was a prior military service guy who took his life this week. He was a firefighter nearby locally. And there's a lot of issues. I mean, let's leave law enforcement alone and just talk about firefighters. Is, what do you see and what do you hear as the big challenges? And broadly, like, what do you think can be done? Not just like, it's not just, this isn't supposed to be Warrior PATHH as a solution to everything. It's what is going on in the culture of being a firefighter that needs to get addressed, and how can we all be a more constructive part of that conversation?
Real quick, I had to finish up on my answer to your question. With my TBI, I sometimes get sidetracked. And then the best of both worlds in San Diego, we've got the beach and the perfect temperatures. So it's the best of both worlds. But regarding today's fire service, interestingly enough, there's more firefighter deaths caused by their own hands or suicide than there is in burning buildings or in the line of duty. And that's just unacceptable. And they're not keeping track, but estimates are about 450 to 500 firefighters a year are killing themselves. And I get it. I did 29 and a half years without an injury until I nearly got killed. But I saw a lot of carnage in that 25 years, death and destruction. And but I enjoyed every minute of doing the best I could do to help somebody on their worst day. But when you're doing it, it seems to be okay. It's when you stop doing it when the ghosts get active, I think. You know what I mean? And it seems like the firefighters are getting a lot of support with all these fires and whatnot. But the paradigm is shifting. But I still think there's a problem in the fire service where a lot of the experienced folks think that we need to hire tougher mentally emotional psyches than provide systems to help deal with the stuff. And I was a good firefighter and a pretty tough guy, and here I was after a rewarding career where I think I made a difference, contemplating jumping off the Coronado Bridge when my career was done. And it's a tough situation. A lot of hours, a lot of carnage, a lot of unhealthy habits as far as nutrition and sleeping stuff, where you don't get much sleep, and if you do get sleep, you get woken up and your heart rate goes from 48 or 52 beats a minute to 180 in a split second, 3 or 4 times a day. And then the cancer considerations. A lot of guys retire and die of cancer 3 or 5 years later, and it's really, there's a lot of negatives that the lay people aren't really familiar with. It's stressful. It's a lot of second guessing, where if I would have done this, could that have been better? Anticipatory stress, which sounds silly, but it's real. That type of stuff, I guess.
Got it. No, and it makes sense. And when you talk about the suicide numbers, is it, and we've done some work with firefighters. I've done more work with law enforcement. Is they don't know. Like you said, one of the challenges is, and suicide numbers are always hard to come by. But the military and the VA have to do a better job just because they're applied to. Is they think that the active duty, if you will, on law enforcement is much higher than out, right? And in the military community, it's the opposite. It's a massive issue when people get out, similar to the transitions you talked about. So are you seeing more of an issue of people who are still in or when they get out?
Both. I would say it's an equal amount. Maybe worsened by when you retire and the camaraderie goes away like a balloon running out of air. I mean, my firefighter brothers were long gone after about 6 weeks into my recovery. Part of that was my fault. I was an angry, injured person and probably wasn't the best friend, but the camaraderie goes away real quick. The brotherhood or sisterhood or the familyhood aspect goes away. The adrenaline kick that I think I lived for goes kaput. And it all just kind of collapses. And kind of lost my train of thought. But
yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And I think, that challenge of which for you had a forcing function of, and I was having a call with a friend today about transition to the military is that's one of the hardest things to do in life is to have to reinvent yourself, and particularly to reinvent yourself, notwithstanding the carnage and the challenge, but to reinvent yourself. And look, there's a guy who is very famous in San Diego he still is Junior Seau. And I know people can talk about, I'm not disputing that he probably didn't have knocks on his head, but I don't think Junior Seau could contemplate a world. He's a football player, for those who don't know, for a long, like 18, 19 years. And
he's like an icon in San Diego.
Is that he couldn't envision a world where he wasn't Junior Seau, the guy lacing up his cleats and being part of that team, and couldn't find a way to create a life that you've talked about, right? Is a life that's meaningful, that's purposeful, that, it's interesting, like you talk about wanting to be around people on their worst day. And it may not be that those kids are their worst day, but like you could give people who have a lot of bad days a really good one, right? So like the through line to your life is you're the person who turns days around like that, which is, and just you do it in different ways. And I think that's the hardest part in life, I think, is to reinvent yourself.
Well, and before my injury, those people, and we're talking the tilt back wheelchairs and that type of stuff, I would see them coming and they would be invisible to me, or I would look the other way. But until my injury, which changed all that, it gave me the empathy and the compassion to do something about it. And the other thing, to go back on our previous point, you see all the memes and all that stuff, reach out, get help, don't commit suicide. The problem is, who the hell do you call? I mean, I got firefighters calling me saying, okay, I drink too much, I'm suicidal, my wife's leaving me. Who do I call? And I'm like, hold on, I'll get back to you and I'll figure out. It's not like, there's not like a 911 for first responder or soldier mental health. And there almost kind of needs to be, Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, we've been dealing with this lately is, someone who's suicidal, right, will end up either self-admitting or essentially getting locked up under the Baker Act for 72-hour hold, likely severely medicated, right? And then what, right? And, from our perspective at Warrior PATHH, we need someone to have a modicum of stability, because it's not an easy program, right? You're sitting in your chair, you're learning a lot of stuff, it's like a fire hose. So it's not like, if you're super, super raw, if that's the right word, it's a little hard to be able to do it. And then you get into this issue where it is a real challenge that if people go into the system, and then if you're a firefighter, I'd assume that's like a regular hospital, is you may never be okay, right? And I don't just mean like fairy dust okay. I just mean like it's the point, you kind of cross the Rubicon. And I think that's one of the things that, we talk about is, if someone's acutely suicidal, it's like you got to essentially like lock them up for their own protection. But there's not a lot of good answers.
No, and my sense is in the firefighting community, once you admit to needing help for emotional, mental health and welfare, you kind of get a scarlet letter, whether people want to say you do or not. You become that person. And people don't, in general, this is just my opinion, but they don't know how to act around you. They're uncomfortable being around you, even though they're probably going through the same thoughts and processes, but you become that ostracized person without a home, and it's a strange place to be. That's why I think there's not a lot of people reaching out for help because they don't want to be labeled. And the second part of that is, if you do reach out for help, it's not that easy to find as much as we'd like to think it is.
Yeah, and your point is really interesting. It reminds me of the Hanoi Hilton. It reminds me of when I was going through divorce. It's like you become like the scarlet letter is when you say you're struggling. I think it's like people either think it's contagious, or more importantly, is you're just speaking what everyone's feeling, and it's almost like everyone else wants to pretend, right? It's kind of the emperor has no clothes sort of a thing, where they want to pretend like everything's fine, and when someone punctures that reality, they can't deal with it. It scares people, right?
Yeah, and it's a tough place to be. And I'm not sure what the solution is. It's getting better, certainly. There's more options available out there, but I still think we're way behind the curve. We could always do better.
Yeah,
it's great to have a or a blown out shoulder. That's fine, but boy, if you've got stress disorder or something like the alcohol problem, stay away from me.
Well, and I think it's a real issue that you mentioned, which is this sort of myth of like, oh, well, we just need to recruit better, we just need to screen better because we'll get people. And it's one of my frustrations around the use of the term resilience is, we're going to train you to be so strong that nothing will affect you. Well, seeing carnage and seeing what you see and having to do what you do day after day, it's going to affect you. The only question is, how do you make sense of it and be able to talk about the stuff that bothers you? Like, because all you do is teach people, if the goal is mental toughness at all costs, and all you do is teach people not to talk about stuff because it's a sign of weakness, because we trained you to be strong, so this stuff shouldn't bother you. And I think we set up a lot of people. I mean, 3 of the 4 most stressful positions in the world are fire, police, military service. The 4th is air traffic control. And that lifestyle, even without some sort of like injury, that lifestyle will take a toll. Like you said, constantly being exposed to stress takes a toll. It's not good for us.
No, and it's interesting though. I think you become subtly accustomed to it and actually enjoy it to a certain extent, because that's one of my problems, or one of the issues I am challenged with, is not having that stress. And now what the hell do I do to get through the day when I'm not waiting for the next adrenaline rush or waiting for the next person to cut out of a vehicle, or it's really a completely 180 lifestyle change.
I heard it recently kind of mentioned about the distinction between Bruce Wayne and Batman. And it's like, once you get used to being Batman, it's really hard to be Bruce Wayne.
I like that. That's spot on for sure.
So a couple of things that I want to conclude with. I think the first thing is, what would you say? And let's, we'll say firefighters, but any of your brothers and sisters in the warrior professions, what would you say to them if they're struggling, if parts of your story resonate with them? What would you say to them?
Again, it's back to that reach out and seek help. And earlier I said I did the stair climb for the Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance. It actually benefits firefighter aid in San Diego. However, the Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance is an organization for firefighters. They track suicides, and they also provide a connector program for people who need help. And that's FFBHA.org. And they can connect those firefighters with a program. And I've also recommended BCR to several firefighters, and have shared that quite regularly. But if there is somebody struggling, reach out, maybe through your EAP counselor as a start. Give me a call. I'll be happy to share my number if that's appropriate, Josh, or the Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance. But life is short, and I learned that the hard way. And there's no sense in making it any shorter than it has to be. That is not the answer. All you do is pass that pain on to somebody else. And the best thing to do is meet it head on and make the best out of a bad situation and learn to struggle well.
And then the last thing, and thank you for that, Matt. And I'd also just add, like, if you're struggling, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, you're a normal human being, and this is the in some respects the price of the lifestyle. And I think that, you know, and I think just know that, like, if you feel like you don't want to be here, if you feel, you know, overwhelmed, the rest of it, there's nothing wrong with you. And I think it's, you know, like Matt said, and hit up us at Boulder Crest and, you know, work on this. The second thing is, as you think about, and I'm not trying to ask you to be overly profound, but you are a very thoughtful guy, is like, what wisdom, what helps you, and what kind of encapsulates what you've learned about life and your journey that's meaningful, that you would want to pass on to other people?
It's not about self. It's about the greater good and what you as an individual can do for the greater good. I think we've really lost track of that. And the reward is truly giving back. That's the reward. And that's what we need to do more of.
Well, there's no better way to end it, Matt. Thank you for who you are, for how you are, for what you do, for the strength and the honesty you bring to the table. You definitely make the people who you come into contact with better people. And I'm grateful for that. And like I said, you know, you're somebody who set out to help people on their worst day. And now you take people who have a shit ton of bad days and worse days, and you help those days become better. And I know you do that for yourself too. And I love you for it. And I'm super grateful and feel blessed that our paths crossed and that we get the chance to know you and learn from you.
I love you, my brother. I didn't know I could swear. I'd have been swearing this whole time.
I don't know if we can either, but I did. All right. Well, thank you. And like Matt said, hit us up if you're interested in learning more from him or from us. We'll talk to you in the next time.